you're thinking of working with your family or anyone, get a very clear idea of who's going to be doing what, put names on it, write it down somewhere where you can take a look. Just talk about the role, talk about who's going to be doing the role, and then talk about some expectations of how the role gets done. And a secret, or maybe now not so secret hack on this is all right, everyone, we are back with another one of these episodes in the limited series with Lindsay Lucas, and this one's going to be a good one. Thank you so much for hopping on today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I get a lot of questions around this, so thanks for letting me come on and have a chat. Yeah,
this is going to be neat because so many people, I think this is where the venue ownership dream starts a lot of times. And so yeah, let's break into it. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so we're talking about turning your family property into a wedding venue. The reason why I am excited to talk about this because I get a lot of inquiries around this where they have a beautiful property, but maybe they only have their homestead, their primary living residence on site, but they have a lot of family and friends that ask them like, hey, could we have a low-key wedding here? And it kind of piques interest and they have it, and then maybe another friend or family member asked the same thing because they were at the wedding and it was beautiful and executed so wonderfully and was just relaxed. Everybody had a good time and pictures turned out wonderful. And so then they ask. And so then the owner of the property is like, this could be a thing. I could have my mortgage paid for, right? So I think that's where the wheels start turning and they get a little taste and it looks pretty good. And so that's when I start getting those inquiries.
Definitely. I've seen that so often as well in some of the consulting clients we've had and some of the people that we've talked to. Maybe someone's daughter got married at their property and they fixed it up. They put $200,000 into the property, just really making it nice. Maybe they put in some bathrooms. And then she got married and people are seeing pictures on social media. Hey, where'd you get married? That's gorgeous. Oh, it's at our property. Oh, no way. And so it's definitely, the topic getting brought up is definitely a work in progress over a couple of years. And then there's kind of a tipping point where it's like, hey, let's do this. Who wants to take this on with me, right?
Yes.
So kind of in that vein, we're gonna dive into that topic because there's a lot to unpack here. Not only in that first phase of deciding is this something that we want to tackle, but then also if you are going to have your venue be where you live, right? If your property now where you have a homestead or you have a home, if it's going to double as a wedding venue, what considerations do you need to have? And then also, if you're working on this with family and if the wedding venue team, right, and the operations that you have are family members, how do you set this up for success so that, you have long-term success, you don't end up burning out the relationships and, the whole thing is not a great experience. So yeah, for sure. Yeah. Lindsay, have you worked directly with someone who has either purchased a property or currently lives on a property that's doing a wedding venue? Yeah,
so I have had the experience of, the example that I explained earlier where they just have their primary residence on site and somebody asks if they can host the wedding and it kind of snowballs from there. But then I've also had clients that they intentionally purchase a large enough property to build a venue and their primary residence. They want to live on site. And so at that point we start talking about, okay, what are best practices for protecting my privacy, protecting my time, especially if, you're moving your kids on site, if it's a young family, right? We have to talk about that. What's restricted on the property? What can't guests and the public have access to? Signage, how are we notifying guests of that? Are there physical barriers like fences or hedging or something of that nature? And so obviously I'm talking about things that are very property specific, but those are all the things that you kind of need to take in mind and into consideration. So
after talking with many venue owners on the venue owner series, many of which who do live on site, the number one complaint or concern that I've heard venue owners say is that they don't like that people disrespect the property. They feel like it's a disrespect, and it feels personal because someone is smoking a cigarette and then they flick the butt somewhere, or they're drinking a beer can and they throw it on the ground or whatever. And normally that's littering and it'd be frowned upon, and oh, they shouldn't do that. It feels so personal when it's your property, your home, and they're doing that. So that I know is a consideration as well, just to like even be mindful of and set the expectation. People are going to be treating this like a commercial space, and to steel yourself emotionally against that, and getting, I don't want to say an attitude, but just like getting really upset over time because you don't feel people are respecting the property with the same amount of love and care and respect that you have for it.
Yeah. And, it's all valid, right? Like, it should be personal. It's their personal property. They've worked hard. They poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this. Like, I can totally see that and respect that, right? So I don't blame them. I would be upset if someone came to my house and started smoking up a chimney and tossing their butts all over, and then my kids go and play in the yard.
Yep.
So I get it.
Yep. Your front yard ends up being a portion of the venue in some way. So let's dive into this. I know you said privacy, right, is a big thing. Access, like public access. Where do people get to go? Where do they not get to go? Another thing is tours and people showing up before. Like, how do you have those boundaries if you live on the property to say, mother of the bride just wants to just pop by a couple days before and drop something off because, you guys live on the property, I'm sure you'll be there, right?
You're right.
Sort of stuff. What advice, or like, what are some best practices around this?
Yeah, so I would say being very intentional and upfront and transparent about business hours. You set them from the beginning, have them posted on signage, and then also security cameras are great, gates are great, fencing is great, signage. So I think that you have to create layers of protection and reinforcing the privacy, the boundaries, and making sure if you do have a team, even if it's just like one venue manager, two venue managers, or a sales coordinator, then maybe you make sure that they are well versed on what your boundaries are as well, and that they're comfortable enforcing them, because sometimes we have to be a little bit more forceful when we are enforcing our boundaries with some clients than what we do with others.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, when I was just in Texas a couple days ago, I was talking to this couple who owned this venue, and it's a similar situation. They have a house probably, I don't know, half a mile away. So it's fairly close. And they said that they have some wedding couples that they can say, hey, have a blast, have the best time ever, cut loose, relax. And they can say that to them, and that couple will do that, and it's a wonderful experience. And the couple almost needs to be given that permission. They have other couples that they have to be so strict and hard on, because if they told them to cut loose and run around, they said they had someone without pants on running around spraying the fire extinguisher all over the venue. And so you get those two scenarios. You really have to feel the couples out, because all couples are not created equal.
Correct. Yeah. Which is so interesting, because it's like those couples got the same marketing. They got the same tour. They got the same spiel. So it's like, what did I do different to attract like the extreme ends of the spectrum, right?
Hey there, wanted to take a quick break and share a little bit about Common Sense Events and the consulting services that we provide. In the past year, Common Sense Events has been able to partner with several venues and provide consulting services around everything from marketing, sales, and operations. We've worked with families, helping smooth out operational hiccups. We've worked with teams to help their marketing departments book more events, and we've worked with sales teams to make sure they're able to have higher converting tours. So if that sounds interesting to you, we would love to have a conversation about that. You can contact us at venues@cseventservices.com. You can also just reach out on the podcast and send us a DM if this is interesting to you, but we would love to talk with you and see if there's a way that we can partner with you and your venue and help make your venue run smoother. All right, back to the show. And you can't be a jerk. You can't treat everyone. You can't like fall to the lowest common denominator, right? Like you can't just be extremely terse and, enforcing of the rules and a borderline unpleasant with the sweeter, kinder couple. But that is absolutely what is needed and what you have to do for some other couples. And they won't even take like offense at it necessarily. You'll just need to be, it'll feel like you're needing to be heavier handed.
Yes. So I'm interested. I know you just had this awesome trip and it probably felt like a whirlwind when you came to Texas because you saw so many at one time. But you just mentioned the one and they live like half a mile away, right? So was it family owned and family operated?
Yes, family owned, family operated. It was literally it was the situation that I described before, which was dad buys the property for something else. Someone ends up getting married at the property. One of the daughters end up getting married at the property. Then the property, it was like, that's cool. A family friend got married. That's cool. Next year, 2 or 3 people got married there, in your church or in your community. And then it was like, hey, this is kind of something neat. Well, the father actually ends up passing away. And the mom and the daughter take it on as a project that they're going to do together. And they turn into this gorgeous wedding venue. I mean, they're crushing it. But it was kind of that progression. And so they do live on the property now, not full time, but they live on the property and and then they also have the venue there as well.
Gotcha. So did they have you come out to like talk about improving operations?
That one specifically, it was about full-scale management because what the situation was, some of the family members are getting a little bit older. The daughter, the original daughter who was working on it with her mom, she really wanted to step away from daily involvement in the property and the daily management. And, they have 70 weddings booked for next year already. And so she was just looking at that. And I think they want to have another baby and it's kind of not their full-time gig. It's not what she's, educated in. And so she kind of just said, hey, we did this for a little bit. It's like a very cool, successful and financially, profitable hobby essentially. But now we need the property to work on its own. And they didn't want to sell it because it's a family property. It's going to stay in their family for generations, most likely. But so they have this problem. And that's where, myself and my team come in. We can help manage things for people who don't want to sell the property and they want to keep executing the weddings and keep the revenue from that coming in. And our team's able to blend in and kind of fit in really well with what they have going on.
That's awesome. So that was that example. What about do you work with a lot of clients that they live on site? And what have you seen that has worked best?
I've noticed that there is a difference between West Coast clients and clients that I worked with throughout the rest of the country. So Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, we've talked to people who own venues and we've consulted with them. And now we're even managing some of the properties where it will be owners who live on site or owners who have a residence on site that they're there maybe 50% of the time. That seems to be very common in the Midwest versus on the West Coast. I'm seeing a lot of, corporations own the building or the property. Nonprofits will own a property and want to monetize it to support what they're doing. A church, but it's not the sort of thing where they're blending residence with venue.
Gotcha. So in those scenarios, what are the roles, or are they truly just an investor?
In those scenarios, meaning where they're living on site and also,
yeah.
Oh, and that's a little bit tricky because you're transitioning from owning the place and it's your place of work to just living there and not having an active role. And I think there's a shift that happens in terms of wanting to be more hands-on with the couples because that's what you're used to stepping back a little bit more and saying, okay, we've got a great team who's going to execute all that and I'm going to kind of stay in the property. And that's one of the things that we look for when we're looking at properties to manage, we want to truly make sure we're an asset to the owner, and we're not going to get in their way and they're not going to get in our way. We want to make sure that we're able to correctly run the business to the profitability of them and the property, right? And that has to happen when the owner is truly ready to not have an active role in the operations of the business and really wants to step back and be more of an investor, like you said.
Yeah. So I have so many questions, like what within the time frame of the passing of the baton, right? Like owner lives on site, they want to be more passive, they want to bring you in, passing the torch to you operationally speaking. Like what is the time frame and like just a general, I know everybody is different and, you know, we can get into like their specifics and stuff, or we don't have to get into their specifics, but what's the general time frame of like passing of the baton with you and your team, from getting to know the property, getting to know the operations, improving those operations, and putting your own workflows and systems in place to when y'all are like full blown?
That's a great question. And of course, the answer is it's all custom, but typically what we've seen, because every property and every owner is different, the dynamics, I mean, it's all over the place, right? So there really is a no one size fits all, but the pillars that we do have our systems built around are a 90-day implementation, where that's kind of where we're just getting in the door. We're just getting some of the, we're getting all the stuff, the passwords and kind of, oh, this is where this, and that's the water shut off, and like some of those things. And then there's about a 6-month phase where we're transitioning over. And a lot of it depends on if there are existing weddings that are on the books that we're taking over management of, or if there's a clean calendar. So we address those things 2 different ways. But what we do is it's a 6-month process typically, and we take over in a very, I would say, very subtle way, because the goal is not to be like, hey, here are the keys, I'm hands off, and we're the new sheriff in town, and like we're changing things here. That's not what we do at all. We come in and we look and say, okay, what's working? What's achieving the result that we're looking for, which is more bookings, happy couples, reviews, what's working. And so we usually like to focus on the thing that's working the least, because we know we can add value there. So let's say someone has terrible reviews. Well, we're going to go in and look at the operations. We're going to look at like what's going on at the wedding. And so that's probably where we're going to focus first. We're not going to show up as much on the sales side, because whatever's happening in sales or marketing land is working. And so we do that. But again, since our company is coming under the brand of the existing property, we're really looking to make it as smooth as possible. And so we position and we counsel our owners to say, hey, I have a team now. I'm starting to work with this team and they're helping. Instead of like, I hired a management company from California, like not great necessarily. If you're someplace in the Midwest, like that's not going to resonate if you're in a small town. And I was born and raised on a small farm in Texas, and I get it. I get that there are those, dynamics and the way people think about things in play. But, we really want to come on board as a partner with the owner. And then the owner starts slowly taking steps back, and we slowly are taking steps forward. But it doesn't feel like owner's here today, gone tomorrow. It's very much a gradual process.
Got it. Yeah, that's awesome. So if you're working with a client where the family lives on site, are there things that would be helpful? Like if somebody listening today is like, I have an awesome property, I live on site, what are some like things that they could be doing to kind of like, I don't know, get their family members on board with this idea and talk through it with them of like, this is what it would look like. Like how do you start initiating those conversations, and like, what are some best practices in that area that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think especially when you do have a number of different dynamics in play, people have different motivations for why they would be interested in doing something like that. And you have to understand that. We actually did a consulting gig with a family out in Texas, and they're all doing this, but you can tell, and even when we talk to them on the initial call, everyone has a little bit of something different that they're looking to get out of the project. And that's their emotional buy-in. That's the reason why they are interested in making this happen. And you really have to address that. And so, my advice to you, if you're listening to this or watching and you've got this beautiful property, you've got a portion of the property that you feel like really has an opportunity to be developed for weddings and events, you need to understand what are going to be the meaningful pieces for everyone. And you're a salesperson at that point. You're a negotiator, right? And you need to go in and say, okay, what things are valuable to, Uncle Jim, who has another, residence on the property, and what is important to my mom and dad, and what's important to, who are the stakeholders, who has a voice in this, what is important to them, and then how do I solve the potential issues that those people will bring up and bring those solutions to the table. And I would say it's a combination of that, and then realizing that the discussion may be a little bit longer. It's not going to be, depending on, who your family is, but the conversation might be a little bit longer because it might be like, great, 2 people love this idea, 2 people are really opposed to it, and I've seen that before. Hey, we want to do this, even little things like, hey, we want to add a bar program. All the family loves it. It makes financial sense. One of the family members is a lawyer and says it's going to add way too much liability. That stuff happens quite frequently. So yeah, I would just say, realize that you are a salesperson. You're going to be negotiating. You need to understand the drivers and kind of the mentality of the people that you're presenting this to, and hope to solve those issues. And then realize it's going to be, not like everyone's going to say yes right away, but it might be like, hey, that sounds like a good idea. And you'll have to prove that, you're going to own this, you're going to take this on, or that it's going to work. And you're going to do that through metrics, through numbers. You'll have a spreadsheet, you'll have a proposal, you have some of these different things, and it might feel a little extra, might feel a little over the top, but I think it's really what's necessary. If you have people to convince, again, whether it's family, shareholders, the bank, like whoever, you have to show them, hey, this is going to work. This is my plan. This is my proof. I've talked to some wedding planners in the area. There's a lack of this style of venue. We are sitting right on that right now. I'm going to handle this part. I'm going to listen to the Venue RX podcast, and I'm going to, learn some things. I'm going to go into TVA, and I'm going to, learn this. This is my plan. This is how much it's going to cost. This is what year 1 looks like in terms of finances. And then this is how I'm pushing out liability. We're hiring this person for a contract. Like, when you start solving some of those problems, I think people are a lot more open to a discussion around something, even if they initially would feel opposed to it.
Yeah. So it kind of feels like what you're saying is like, your mindset has to already be treating this business like a business when it's not a business yet, right? So we kind of already have to have that mindset of putting parameters in place and treating it like it's a business, even though right now it's just a hobby because, cousin Annie is going to get married here in October and it's 6 months away, right? But I think you brought up some really good points with putting the financials there and crunching all the numbers and like truly treating it like a business. Are there any tips you would give?
No, go for it. No, you go for it. You had one lined up. No.
I was going to say, are there any tips that you could give? Because you mentioned like figuring out which family member is going to do this and which one's going to do that. Like, do you have like any tips on how to figure out like each person's strengths and weaknesses and taking those strengths and applying them to a particular role? Or like, how would you establish roles and responsibilities?
So this is tricky because I think we all have a bias. We all are pretty subjective, right? In terms of our skills and abilities. We might have a little bit of an inkling in terms of what we enjoy doing. So like, I'm more outgoing, maybe I'll do sales or things like that. But I think it's really, really important to come into this conversation with some humility and for everyone at the table, and just to say, hey, where can I serve this business the most? And instead of thinking about it like you first, like you have a skill in sales, okay, you're going to do sales. How are you going to do sales for the business? Think about it like, what does the venue need? What are the positions the venue is going to need? Well, it's going to need a venue manager. It's going to need someone who focuses on sales. Venues more usually focused on operations. There's going to be someone who needs to market and share what the venue has with the world, right? There's going to need to be someone who is a project manager and maybe is not the most gregarious and outgoing and friendly person, but they know how to stick to a timeline. They know how to stick to a budget. They know how to organize people. They know how to get things done, right? And so you look at all of that, and this is how we think about it. We lay it all out and say, great, I have this role, this role, this role, this role, and then you start assigning names to the role. And the names that you assign to the role are the people who are accountable to get that thing done. So they might have other people who help them, but they are not the ones. Those people that are helping them might be, they're a more of a technician rather than the owner of the role. I'll just give you a very quick example. You can have someone who's in charge of marketing, like the marketing seat. Under them or working with them, you might have someone who's handling social media or websites or things like that. And it's important to realize I'm talking about all these positions. This could be 3 or 4 people. Yeah. Just family members, right? But calling it out like this completely changes the expectation. Instead of you mentioned cousin Annie or whoever, even a husband and wife couple, even friends, even siblings, whoever, you've got to say, hey, I love marketing. The venue needs marketing. I'm going to put my name on the marketing, and I'm going to wear the social media hat, and I'm going to wear the advertising hat, and I'm going to wear so your name will be on all those roles, especially in the beginning, but you have to realize you are going to be accountable for that department, that the progress is made, and you're going to be responsible and accountable for getting it done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I wanted to add one more piece on that. So that is important because oftentimes I think we don't realize, I think we all have incredible gifts and abilities, but we don't necessarily know ourselves how to apply them in the way that will make the best result. And I think that's where a lot of the struggle comes from in our maybe personal or professional lives sometimes, because you think I really want to do this, and your skill set is just a little this way. And so the friction comes because you're kind of grinding along this line of where your skill set, where your gifts and abilities are, and then where you really should be positioned. And maybe you do that out of necessity, right? Maybe it's because no one else is there to do it right now, so you're just filling the need. But that's really important, and I think it's a beautiful thing to find someone who is aware of and also seated in the right seat for them that produces the best result. And so if you come at it with that mindset, someone in your family even, and that may be a tough or weird conversation to have, but they might say, hey, I know you want to do sales. I see you as a much better marketer. You may have trouble being accountable to the day in, day out aggressive sales activity that's needed, but gosh, you can share a story with the community and with the world. But you might think of yourself, I'm a salesperson. I can connect with people. I'm outgoing. This is my role. Someone else is going to see something else. And so being, again, humble, being willing to hear that and then kind of transition and slot in that role is really helpful. Hey there, pardon the interruption. I wanted to take a moment and share with you about WEVA. WEVA is a professional association we started last year for venue owners and operators. It stands for Wedding and Event Venue Association, and it's the first professional association for venue owners and operators, specifically providing resources, education, and networking opportunities for venue owners and operators. Let's face it, owning a venue is very difficult, and if you own or operate a venue, or if you're considering owning or operating a venue, you need resources, networking, and a community that understands and supports you and your goals as you continue to grow your business. WEVA is just that. We've built it to be a support to you as you grow your venue business, and we want you inside of our community. So if this sounds interesting to you, please click on the link in the description in this video or wherever this video is linked, and we would love to welcome you into the community.
That's great. What a great piece of advice. I love that. Okay, so I have one more pressing question that I had on my list that I really wanted to ask you as far as family members and working with them. What is not a mistake that you see, like a big mistake that you see, but like an area of improvement that you feel like this particular scenario that we're talking about, family living on site, turning their property into a venue, like what is a big area of improvement whenever they're first starting this? So like if someone is thinking about doing this and working with their family, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would have for them?
Not correctly setting expectations. Because if you leave things up to assumption, like if you talk about 6 major items, whatever those things are, maybe it's role assigning, like, okay, sales, marketing, whatever, you can assign it, you can talk about it, but if you're not specific in terms of who is actually going to be accountable for it and the expectations that the group has for that person, it leaves room for a lot of miscommunication, and it opens you up down the road to feel discouraged, let down, and you're going to feel let down without the other person realizing they're letting you down because the expectation hasn't been set from the beginning. So I would really say, like, if you're thinking of working with your family or anyone, get a very clear idea of who's going to be doing what. Put names on it, write it down somewhere where you can take a look. We use something called Lucid Chart for that. There's a free version of it, for anyone. You can just look at, like, I think it's lucid.app or something like that. But use something like that. And even if it's as simple as a spreadsheet, but just talk about the role, talk about who's going to be doing the role, and then talk about some expectations of how the role gets done. And a kind of secret, or maybe now not so secret hack on this is, if you ever don't want to be in the role anymore, you will have a very clearly defined role to hire for.
Great.
And I can't tell you how important that is, because I come from a family of, very capable women for sure, but also just capable people in general. Like we're pretty multi-talented. We can kind of see a need, fill in for the need, and we're pretty organically flowing together. If I'm with my sisters and we're making something in the kitchen, and we're like, we know who's where, and we're just getting it done, and hey, I'll do this, and oh great. And when someone drops the ball, someone else kind of fills in, and that happens maybe when you're in the kitchen cooking food, and if you mess something up, then something gets dropped or something gets burned or whatever, and that's a low problem to have. But if you add pressure of finances, of people coming to the property, you add all these pressures, and you don't have that same level of rapport with your family, it's like, no, I thought you were going to do that. No, I was doing this over here. And it creates chaos inside the family relationship, and that's not worth whatever dollars you're making, So those 2 things I think are important, and definitely really defining the role for the next person you're going to hire. If you plan for it like that, the family member in the role is going to thrive, and then there's always going to be the freedom to outsource it.
Yeah, I love that. So that's great advice for like in the beginning and setting a really good solid foundation. What about for the people listening that they've already started working with their family and they're kind of in the sticky middle of it, and they're starting to notice like maybe a family member or two are kind of dropping hints of, I don't want to do this forever. Like, what would be a piece of advice for them to prepare in case a family member is potentially leaving to go and, it's no longer a good fit. Their motivations have changed, their goals have changed, and it doesn't even have to be like an animosity kind of thing. It's just they're wanting to grow and do something else.
Totally. Someone's getting pregnant, wants to transition a little bit more to, or adding a second or third baby, wants to transition a little bit more to a less active business role, something that's a little bit more passive. That's such a good question. And Lindsay, it's a tough conversation if you're going to have it and you've never had it before. But that's why at the beginning, if you do it in the beginning, you already are starting succession planning, which is you've seen success, you're looking at what the next phase is going to be, and you've already talked about that. And I think that's so important. But let's say you're listening to this or watching this and you're like, man, we did not start this correctly. that is going to be a hard conversation. And I would say start the conversation before those things. So don't, like, you can just confront the person. Be like, hey, Sally, we need to talk. I keep hearing you hint about, you stepping away from involvement in the project, or I'm seeing things slip. Tell me about this. And anyone can say this. Anyone can bring it up. But instead of having that conversation, which may be necessary, so you'll just have to like buck up and get that one done. But if you want to avoid that, the second that you hear this podcast or the second that you can start implementing this, go to the team and say, hey, for the greater good of our family, the property, the business venture, whatever, let's talk about what we want to have happen whenever any one of us doesn't want to be in this role. And if you position it like that, it's not directed towards anyone. It's not confrontational. People have big egos, but also people really care a lot about, excellence and putting their best foot forward. And so if you are subtly hinting that, hey, we need to talk about succession planning, and I'm looking at you, Sally, right? Like, if that's the vibe, people are not going to respond well to that. Even if Sally does want to get out, her knee-jerk reaction is going to be to just push in more because it doesn't feel good to be kind of hinted at that she's not achieving the results that are expected. So yeah, positioning a little bit of a different way, to having that conversation as early as possible so that when the conversation does have to like actually happen, it's like, this is just refiring a conversation and expectation around transition of roles that we've already had versus, oh, this is the first time I'm hearing about this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's great to have that annual check-in meeting, like maybe I call it dead week. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's, right? Like nobody really knows what day it is, and so it's like, that's when we have all of our big team meetings. And that's when I check in with my team. And I'm like, hey, you still happy with your role and what you're doing? What do you like? What do you not like? Can I take something off your plate? Do I need to hire somebody for this? And so setting those annual meetings, because then it's not like, okay, I need to have this one-off really weird meeting and talk like vaguely around the situation, right? So if you can set that and everybody knows to expect, oh yeah, it's dead week, we're going to have a check-in. Or if you need to do it quarterly.
Yeah, I would say I would do it quarterly, especially like you want to keep short accounts, especially if it's with family. Things change for people quickly. Seasonality is a big thing. Kids going to school, coming back to school, or coming back from school. So definitely, I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been an awesome, I feel like we've really covered a lot of different topics, and I'm curious if you've made it to the end. I'd really be curious to hear, if you do work with family, has the experience been positive? Has it been negative? Have there been a bunch of hurdles? Like, let us know in the comments. And, even like if we're, I know we're going to be posting clips of this on Instagram, but send us a message, because this is definitely a business that people do with family. And I think if we can help serve and kind of bring some light to this area, we'll be able to impact a lot of venue owners, which is the goal here. So this has been fun, Lindsay. Thank you.
No, thank you. This is great. Great advice. I loved it. Lots of nuggets.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we'll see everyone in the next episode. Hey friends, Jonathan here, and I wanted to share about Common Sense Events consulting packages. If you are a venue owner and you're struggling with your marketing, your sales, your operations, or maybe there's just, you're new to the industry and you want to really have a leg up and get a jump start on getting your business going and not make a lot of the mistakes that oftentimes people make, the mistakes that we made, frankly, when we first started, we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. Our team has experience working with over 10 venues all across the United States, doing consulting. We've hosted hundreds and hundreds of weddings at this point, and we know what it takes to be successful. If this sounds interesting to you, we would love to chat with you. You can either reach out by filling out the link in the description of the video or podcast, or you can just email us at venues@cseventservices.com, and we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. All right, back to the show.